This is something that they strongly oppose. They have this view, and I've came across many of them, that seem to believe that the £8.6 trillion debt level, or some of them even think it's 1.7 trillion. I don't know why they assume that. They assume that this debt level that the United Kingdom has is the United Kingdom's, and somehow they differentiate Scotland from that. They seem to think that Scotland is not going to take on a large share of the United Kingdom's debt, believe it or not. In fact, some even argue that Scotland would only take 8% or 10% of the UK's national debt. That is to say, they assume that the national debt is 1.7 trillion. They don't realise that the real debt level is sitting at 8.6 trillion pounds in debt. That's because of all the unpaid pensions, etc., the social security. Scotland was a large contributor to that very debt because of all the unpaid pensions, etc., all of the social security. Because of this debt problem that we're faced with, and because we're seeing all of these cutbacks, and they think that this is austerity, this is their argument, again in favour of Scottish independence, because they assume that by separating Scotland from the United Kingdom, in relation to that argument that they have of finally getting a government what they vote for, in translation, what it really means is they want a government that has the higher tax rates, that will increase all the government borrowing and spending. They don't understand where money comes from. It's only going to come from two places. The creditors are the real power. They're the real ones that are going to dictate everything. Scottish nationalists don't realise this. They think that their government somehow matters more than that of the creditors. The creditors even turn to that of the Scottish Libertarian Party leader, and the creditors basically, stated their full support of the Union, and they've warned even the leader of the Scottish Libertarian Party to take stance in favour of the United Kingdom for obvious reasons. The creditors do not feel confident with Scotland separating, and they can see that themselves through the arguments that the Scottish nationalists have, because they think it's just a case of opposing austerity, opposing all the cutbacks, etc., and that's not something creditors are going to stand for. They will punish the government in one of two ways. They will either raise the interest rates to force the government to finance the debt at a higher rate of interest, or the creditors will simply pack their bags and leave. If the Scottish government cannot get the money from the creditors, and let's say the creditors do pack up and leave, the only place that you can turn to for money is the printing press. Good luck trying to finance your economy off the back of that. You're going to be faced with hyperinflation. The other argument and problem with their argument against austerity is the fact that they don't have austerity. How can you be austere? How can you live within your means and somehow have a deficit at the same time? Britain originally had a deficit of over £190 billion. It's now sitting with a budget deficit of about £18 billion or something. You cannot be austere, which basically means to live within your means, and have an £18 billion deficit at the same time. Because the £18 billion deficit simply means there's an overspend. That's how much the government is overspending by. So it's not living within its means. They don't understand that a reduction in spending is not true cuts, right? That's not true cuts, because all you're doing is reducing spending, and that's all that's been happening. That's why you've got an £18 billion deficit. But even if you go along with their argument of the Scottish independence, that they favour, opposing all the cutbacks, they're going to be forced in the direction of England anyway, because Scotland borders England, and when it comes to the job creators, when it comes to that of the businesses, etc., they're not going to stick around to pay for all of that. When you see a country south of the border that lowers tax rates, that's where businesses are going to go. Unless, of course, for some reason the government decides to build a wall and prevent those businesses from trying to leave the country. What will really dictate everything is the Laffer curve. What will really dictate everything is where the businesses will vote with their feet. That is to say that when the Scottish Government do raise the tax rates in order to pay for all its increased government borrowing and spending, to pay for its increased welfare state, etc., in their Scottish independence utopia, the reality is very different, because the businesses will pack up and they will move their businesses out of Scotland and move south into England, because it's cheaper for them to run business. England, with the lower tax rates, will force Scotland, whether it likes it or not, to reduce its tax rates. It will force Scotland in that direction, and it will force Scotland to continue on cutting back. So the point I'm getting at, the Scottish nationalists are never going to escape the cutbacks that they wish for. It's all just, promises made in the media, promises made by the Scottish National Party that they can never live up to. They may raise the tax rates at the moment, but it's all well saying that and doing that in practice, because you will see businesses pulling out.